A very pleasant good evening, a good Sunday evening here from the back patio studios of Kaufman Radio Studios. It is the Todd Kaufman Show, episode number 8. Again, a good Sunday evening to you wherever you might be listening to us, watching us from. We're on Facebook Live if you want to follow along. It's Todd Kaufman Radio, all one word, TODDKAUFMANNRADIO. Or if you want the audio version of the podcast, you can find it on the Anchor or Spotify, Google Podcast. It's also there if you want the audio version as you're driving along during your day, as we're heading into another week. But what a weekend this has been. I wasn't sure if I was going to address this or not, because it really doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't, but the more I thought about it, the more, I'm seeing so many Facebook posts and Twitter posts and Instagram, and I guess for me, I didn't want it to be a written word, because you don't hear context, you don't hear heart, you don't hear so many other things that you can get from seeing someone live on camera, and someone that you can hear the inflection, you can hear the heart behind it. So let me say this: it's not like anyone really cares what I have to say, right? It's not like anyone, I'm not going to move the needle on what's happened. It's a travesty. It's sad. And I talked to so many friends today, just texting back and forth. And I remember saying to most of them, not in a million years did I think I would ever raise kids in an era that we're living in right now. I think a lot of us remember growing up and, just thinking about having kids, thinking about our future, thinking about our homes, thinking about our spouses, and just kind of dreaming out loud. And I don't think anybody ever thought that we would be raising kids in the world that we live in today. And, it's really as simple as Scripture. And I think for me, I want to raise our kids knowing that they can love whoever, it's all about love. That's what it is. Hate has never been stronger than love. And I think that's so incredibly important, that hatred doesn't get us anywhere, no matter what side you're on. And it's not about taking sides. Guys, please understand, I'm not taking sides. It's sad to see what a police officer did to snuff out somebody's life. It's not what a lot of these officers stand for. A lot of these guys, I'm personal friends with at least 3 officers. That's not who these guys are. A lot of us ask why some of this stuff happens. A lot of us ask how it could have been prevented. And now we see the looting and the fires and the violence. And it's just, what are we doing? How do we fix this? And a lot of people have said it right. It's understanding each other. It's loving each other. It's finding a common ground. It's just understanding where everybody's coming from. It's not one side or the other. It's not this. It's not that. It's not black. It's not white. It's understanding each other. It's really that simple, guys. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to say about it. I'm not coming with anything very profound, but just I hope. Well, I will say this. I texted a friend of mine and I said, I had the same conversation with God that I had when my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer last year. And he continues to remind me that we were born with a choice. We were given the option to choose. And those choices we would have to live with. But I think there's a part of me that goes, you got to put a stop to this. At some point, you got to put a stop to this. And that's my prayer. I hope at some point there's a stop to this. I really do. But anyway, that's as much time as I'm going to spend on that. What I do want to spend some time on, and this news broke this past week, is Disney is going to reopen. At least there was a meeting that took place in Florida, and it looks like Disney World is headed for a July 11th reopening. And I think that's exciting. I think that's incredible. I think that's a sign of at least some sort of normalcy And there are a lot of restrictions. There's a friend of ours in our neighborhood that is headed to Disney World before us, I think August or September, with her daughter, and rightly so. And for us, it would be our first trip to Disney World in November, which is when my wife and I are scheduled to go. We were supposed to go for our 10-year wedding anniversary in May 1st, and of course that didn't happen because Disney World closed. But I mean, we thought, with these restrictions in place, the mask, the social distancing, the small crowds, the no fast pass, the no dining, we thought, well, what's really the point? For our first time, this should be an experience, right? But we were talking to this same neighbor last night. We had a game night at our house that was an absolute blast. But their travel agent said the same thing that ours said, which was, just wait, just wait it out. Because you never know over the next 4 or 5 months what's going to happen. Because the state of Florida could lax their restrictions. Disney World could lax their restrictions to respond to those, those restrictions going away. So will masks go away in 4 months? Will the dining be back? And the same point that the travel agent made is the restriction on the crowd size is the reason that the fast pass is being taken away, because with the small crowds are going to be there, you don't need one. You're not going to wait in these long 3-4 hour lines, and you're going to have a fast pass just to go somewhere else and then come back later. The crowd size is enough where you can wait in line, and you're not going to be waiting that long. So I think the decision for my wife and I is it worth it still to us to do? Maybe, maybe not. For our first time, I can understand my wife, and to a certain degree, I have the same wonder. Is it worth it for a first time to not go? I don't know. I think, to me, I can't do a mask. Let me be straight up and simple. I can't do a mask at Disney World, not for 13, 14 hours. I had to be in a different office for the last 2 weeks in Irving, and just walking through the common areas that we have, it's a 3 or 4 minute walk, and I'm like, I can't do it for 3 or 4 minutes. How am I going to do 13 hours, for 4 days? So I think that's the one that I would really look at and go, if there's still masks, yeah, I'm out. We'll plan something for next year or in 2 years or whatever the case may be. But our travel agent said that, what, you've got, you don't have to cancel until you're 30 days out. So let's just wait and see what happens. And that's fair. You don't know what rides are going to be. And I think that's the other concern is when you go to Disney World, your expectations, especially for a first time and you haven't been there before, is you want everything to be open. You want to be able to access everything. You want to be able to access, Rise of the Resistance and the Avatar ride and, some of these other things that you haven't done before. And if those are going to be closed, then again, outside of the mask, what's really the point? If you've been there 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times, then you don't really care about those things. But for a first timer like myself and my wife, we do care. So my question to you, and you can leave this on the comments as you're watching this broadcast, what is your comfort level in returning to Disneyland, Disney World? Do you have a trip coming up? What is your feeling on the restrictions that Disney World has in place right now? Do you care about the restrictions? Do you care about the mask? Is it something that you'll wear and just go, it's Disney World, who cares? And this neighbor of ours made a good point and said, it's Disney. They're still going to put magic into this regardless of what happens. They're still going to put all the stop, they're going to throw out all the stops to make this a great experience, even though they have these restrictions in place. And that very well may be. But again, for a first timer, you got to understand what's it worth? Is it worth the $2 or $3 grand that we're going to spend to maybe not have quite the experience that we might have? Maybe. But again, it's in the eye of the beholder, I think. And, for the eye of the beholder, you look at, it's Disney World. I mean, come on. It's Disney World. Man, let's go have some fun. But on the other side of it, it's Disney World, and you want the experience. You want it all, right? You want the different dining areas. You want the different worlds that they have. You want every ride that you can be a part of. You want every kind of experience. You want to be able to ride what you. And I think that's where you kind of stand back and go, again, what is it worth? Right? So as you're watching this, or if you're watching this back later, tell me what it's worth. Maybe some of you haven't been before, and this would be a first time for you whenever you do schedule to go. And let's just assume that you're going to go around the same time that we're going in November. I know some friends of ours were scheduled to go in April and couldn't because they closed. But it was going to be, I believe, their first or second time, and they were kind of the same thought process. Is it worth it for us to go? So I'm curious what you think. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about here, and I'm not going to make this a terribly long broadcast. I appreciate those who've jumped on and watched. I'm sorry, I don't see the names pop up. So if you're watching, if you want to leave a comment, that would be great. If not, no big deal. But it's schools reopening. That has been the other big topic of conversation, especially around here, is, we're in a specific school district that, a lot of people are wondering what they're going to do. Now, I think a lot of us were surprised when the California State University system, I think it was probably 2 weeks ago, announced that they were going to cancel classes for the fall. And it shocked me because it was May. What are you making that decision in May for? Why not wait till July? Why not wait till the end of July to really make that decision? Or at least if you are going to bring back classes, at least have it with restrictions. Why are you canceling classes right now? What's the point of that? But the argument for a lot of people, there are some people, and rightly so, that think that schools should just let's go back to normal. Right? Let's throw open the doors and let's get back to normal. Is it fair? Sure. I hope they go back to normal. But the people that I've talked to who are involved, who are teachers, who are in administration, guys, there's a lot to consider. There's a lot. This is, you throw the word pandemic around. This isn't cold and flu season, guys. It's just not. So as much as we want our kids to go to school in the fall, and I do, my daughter starts kindergarten in August. I desperately want her to start on time. Has nothing to do with being home. Has nothing to do with our schedule. We've been working from home. If she has to be home and distance learn, we'll make it work. We'll make it work. Has nothing to do with it. And I think that's the problem. A lot of people look at this as, well, you're being selfish. You don't want your kids at home. It has nothing to do with that, guys. To throw that kind of accusation out at parents is just stupid. You want to call us selfish when you don't know what's going on. The opinion may have nothing to do with that. It may have everything to do with a sense of normalcy for our kids, right? And if you're a parent, and especially us who have our kids in a routine, we want our daughter to go to school every day. Because our daughter is so routine oriented that she often wonders what to do with herself when her routine changes. She has had such a drastically hard time these last 4 or 5 months with COVID going on because all of her friends have disappeared. She's continued to go to daycare because we trust the people that are there, and they've done a great job in responding to this. And they've taken the right measures. And we trust that they're keeping the kids safe. So we continue to send ours to daycare every day, and they've done fine. No illness, no fever, no sickness, nothing. But when August starts up, my daughter changes schools. She goes from daycare to actual school. I want her to start on time. I want her to be able to start to build relationships. And I think that's incredibly important, to meet the teachers, to meet new friends, to get acquainted with the school, to get acquainted with a new routine for her. That's incredibly important to us, guys. And for the rest of you parents, I'm sure it's incredibly important to you. Do you care if they start on time? And I'm going to ask kind of the same questions that I asked with the whole Disney stuff. What's your comfort level? Now, the point I make about schools not being able to start, or there's more to consider this, if you will. Let's assume for a second you're a superintendent, regardless of the ISD. And your decision is to throw open the doors as normal. We're going to welcome kids back. No social distancing, no staggered schedule, no AB schedule. I've heard that's kind of in the rumors. But we're throwing the doors open, and everybody's welcome back. What if one kid gets sick, and then two, and then three? One of them tests positive for COVID and, God forbid, loses their life. Then what? Guys, if you look at this, throwing open the doors and returning to school just isn't that simple. Might be simple to you. It might be simple enough where you can want your kids to go to school. Please understand, I'm not sitting here telling you that I don't want my daughter to go to school. I do. I want her to start on time, and I've been pretty clear about that. But I also understand from the teachers and administration that I know that it's really not that simple. That they have to look out for these kids, because if one of them loses their life over COVID and they got sick at school, they caught it from somebody at school, how do you know there's not going to be a lawsuit from that? How do you know if the parent of that child sent their kid back to school reluctantly because that was the only decision they could make? They were hoping that school wouldn't start on time, but when it did, they had to send their kid to school. They got sick and they may have lost their life. I'm not saying that's going to happen. God forbid that it does, and I hope that it doesn't. But this is what these schools have to consider. And before you start jumping up and down on teachers and jumping up and down on administration, understand you're not making these decisions. You're not in the room. You don't know what they have to consider. You don't know the decisions that they have to make. You don't know the people they're talking to. So while you sit there and make your egregious accusations that we need to get back to normalcy, they need to throw open this is dumb, they should go back to school. Again, guys, it's not that simple. So be patient. I think that's what we have been living in, a world, at least over the last 4-5 months, that has been anything but patient, and I understand. We have been stuck at home for so long. We have wanted to get together with friends, and guys, that's what we've been doing. We got together with friends last night because we all said, you know what? Now it's our decision what we want to do. It's our lives, and we're going to take our lives in our hands. Granted, we could have social distancing. Granted, some of that came to an end. But we're born with decisions. We make decisions. We take our own life in our own hands. We're responsible for ourselves. But the frustration level has boiled over. That's why I think what's going on all over the country right now might have something to do, a lot to do with what happened in Minnesota. But to exacerbate the problem with what we've been going through for the last 4 or 5 months, where everybody's been staying home, there's been no school, there's been no sports, there's been no routine, it didn't help the problem. What are you guys going through? Here's what I want to talk to you about. And I'm going to ask this question, and you don't have to post it in a comment. I hope you can reach out privately if you want to. What are you struggling with? What's been the hardest thing for you to deal with over the last 4 or 5 months? What's been the hardest thing for you to do with your kids or your spouse or your family because you couldn't go do these events? Your kids couldn't go to school. Like I talked about my daughter, all of her friends left. And she would have such a hard time coming home because she didn't know what to do with herself. None of her friends were there. She was constantly sad. We constantly had behavioral problems with her because she was acting out because she didn't know how else to deal with it. She didn't know what else to do with herself. She was sad, but she didn't know how to express that. So that's why I look at it. This stuff is tragic that's going on right now. But this problem on top of another one doesn't help. So what's been the hardest thing for you to go through? Has it been, there are a lot of single people who live alone who have been dating or, go to events, or, people who have been married that don't have kids yet, that like to get out, who like to travel, who couldn't do that. I remember talking to a buddy of mine who works for a local police department here, and he said their domestic violence cases and calls have skyrocketed. It's just a hard time we're living in right now, guys. And I was so excited when Major League Baseball announced that they might be returning. Hallelujah. Well, now we don't even know if that's going to happen. But again, another decision is, do you want to go to a sporting event? I do. I do. I love baseball. I do. I grew up a San Diego Padres fan, as you can tell by the hat. Oh, I loved going to Petco Park. That was the greatest time. I lived in Orange County, so I'd make the drive to from Orange County to San Diego on a Sunday morning. We'd go get breakfast in downtown, right on San Diego Bay, and a place called Seaport Village. One of my absolute favorite places. I know the area is being completely revamped, and it's probably not going to look the way it ever looked before. But I would get breakfast. I would listen to a buddy of mine who did the pregame show for the Padres, and then I would drive over to Petco Park and I would go to the game. But now, fast forward, and with the COVID situation that we have now, we have a decision on whether or not we want to go to games anymore. I shouldn't say anymore. We've got the Frisco Rough Riders right down the road from us here. And I can't wait to take my daughter to one. I can't wait till my son's old enough to do it. I don't know if I want to take him out of the way to the Rangers ballpark. Not that, it's inside now, but God almighty, imagine what the tickets are now. But the Rough Riders are such a family-friendly environment for families. And, I think to start there, I'm excited for baseball to be back if it does come back. But I think you take your own life in your own hands when you go to these games. Do you wear masks? Do you not wear masks? Is it required when baseball opens back up? Are the Rough Riders going to require masks to go to game? And then that brings up another question. Do you want to go and watch a game with a mask on? And in the Texas summers, I don't know that anybody does. I think you'd just rather go watch it on TV. And that's the other thing. I don't even know if we're going to be allowed back. From what's being said, it sounds like that Major League Baseball is going to start their season without fans. I can't imagine the NFL is going to do that, but I don't really think they care. I really don't. The kind of TV money they have, the kind of ratings that they draw, their ratings are just going to get stronger. If we can't go to games, you think that there's anybody who's not going to watch those games on Sunday? But I think the one area that will struggle a little bit is college football and college in general, because a lot of these colleges depend on college football for their financial well-being. And a lot of these colleges expect to be able to play football so they can support their other sports. Water polo, golf, baseball even. I just, like I started out the show, guys, this is an amazing time that we live in. Amazing, not in a good way. It's, and I'll give a good friend of mine a shout out, and he knows, you know who you are with what I'm about to say. We don't have problems, we just have more work to do. I remember when he first said that, I thought, you're an idiot. That's the dumbest saying I think I've ever heard. But you know what? It's so true. It's so true. We don't have problems, we just have more work to do. And I use that phrase a lot now, and he and I find it a little bit funny because, it used to stress us out about what was next for our careers and what was next for our jobs and everything that we had to do. And it seems like that saying for us has kind of helped take some of that pressure off. We don't have problems, we just have more work to do. And I think that's the world we live in right now. We don't have problems, we just have more work to do. But you know what I'm scared of, guys? And I'll be very transparent right now. And this was something I texted a good friend of mine. Actually, a couple of friends that I had this conversation with. I even told my wife. I said, we have a very difficult conversation coming up with our oldest daughter and eventually with our son about the world we live in, about race, about understanding, about patience, about... I don't want them to be naive. I don't want them going into the world and learning it from somebody other than us. I don't want them going out in the world and being unprepared for what they're going to face. I want them understanding. And I want them to be understanding. I want them to love. I want them to be encouraging. The way we teach our kids is the way they will go. I truly believe that. The way we teach them, the way we raise them, the way we love them is the way they will go. Raise them up in the way they will go. So maybe it's our fault that this generation is the way it is. I don't know. We certainly like to blame millennials for just about everything, right? Maybe it's not entirely their fault. How many hard conversations weren't had with them? And it's apparent there's any sort of hard conversations that we have to have. And, my wife and I often wonder when to have those conversations. We tried to have the COVID conversation with Hannah, our 5-year-old. She didn't really understand it. It was a quote-unquote sickness to her. Or the virus, I think she called it. My mom is battling stage 4 cancer, as a matter of fact. For those of you who have not heard, she had a CT scan a week and a half ago, and it was not good. It had spread to her abdomen, to her pelvis, to her colon. She had fluid building in her lungs. And when we tried to explain it to our daughter, she thought it was the sickness, the virus. So you get a glimpse of what she really understands, and she doesn't understand or grasp the seriousness of my mom's disease and her prognosis. And she's not going to understand this either. But when do they understand? When is the right time to start that conversation? Is it 6? Is it 7? Is it 8? Will they understand it at that age, or do you wait longer than that? Guys, we make hard decisions as parents all the time, and we've got some really hard ones coming up. Because I know there are a lot of parents, even if schools reopen, aren't going to send their kids back. It's not going to be all of them. It might be a handful. It might be 2%. It might be 3%. But there are going to be some. I don't fault them. Because we all make decisions. We all try to do the best for our kids. Everyone parents different. Everyone parents different. But we like to fault each other, don't we? This kid is that. This kid is this. Sometimes, guys, before we look at somebody else, we got to look in the mirror. Hate has never been stronger than love, ever, and it never will be. Guys, put your nose in Scripture. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to go to this was in one of the devotionals that I was reading the other day, and I thought this was so appropriate for what's going on. This is Romans 12, 9 through 10. Love must be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another with mutual love, showing eagerness in honoring one another. I think if we just treated it that way, and I'll give you another one, Philippians 2, verse 3 through 4. Instead of being motivated by selfish ambition or vanity, each of you should, in humility, be moved to treat one another as more important than yourself. Each of you should be concerned not only about your own interests, but about the interests of others as well. Guys, no matter what you're struggling with, no matter what you're going through, if you have the people in your life who are there for you, if you have people in your life who will answer the phone at all hours of the night, if you have people in your life who actually mean it when they say, if you need something, call, no matter what time. How many times you've been told that and you knew that wasn't authentic? But there are people in your life that are when they say it. If you have those, it's the biggest blessing that you'll ever know. Use that. Don't battle on your own, no matter what you're struggling with. If you want to come to me, if you want to leave a message on the, private message on the page, if you're going through something, let me know. Trust me, I've been down a difficult road myself. Product of a single child, a mom that worked 14, 15 hours a day. Hardly saw her. She was an accountant. Mostly raised by my grandparents. Didn't have any friends in the neighborhood within 40 minutes, actually, of where I live, so I was constantly by myself. Guys, I've been through stuff. I've struggled through a lot of things. But you know what? I'm on the other side of it. Went through 8 years of a job that I hated. When I moved here to Texas, I took that job, but little did I know God did bring me to Texas for a job. He brought me to Texas to meet my wife, and we have now 2 beautiful kids and 10 years of marriage. God has an interesting way of dealing with all of us. But you got to understand what he's trying to do. Stay patient. Stay willing. Stay available. Stay listening. And I hope that reaches out to you. But again, guys, be patient through whatever is next in your life, in our world, and try to understand each other more. Be quick to listen and slow to speak. It's amazing what happens when you do more listening than speaking. Guys, I love y'all. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you signing on. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at T_Kaufmann, Kaufmann. If you're just joining for the first time, Facebook page is Todd Kaufmann Radio, all one word. And you can follow me on Instagram, and I don't have that memorized, so I will look this up real quick before I bounce out of here. And you can reach out on Instagram. TM Kaufmann is the Instagram. I love y'all. Hope you guys have a great Sunday evening, a great week ahead, and I hope this world starts to heal a little bit, because we need it. I love y'all. Have a great Sunday night, and we'll catch you on the flip side. So long, everybody.